Over 2 billion people on this planet drink alcohol, and the vast majority of them will never become addicted. So the question isn't why some people can't stop. The real question, the one nobody actually answers, is why everybody started. Not the alcoholic, not the person in crisis, the ordinary person, the one with a job and a family and a perfectly functional life who still reaches for a drink on a Tuesday night. Why? Because here's the thing. We've spent decades treating drinking like it's either fine or it's a disease. But that framing skips the most interesting part entirely. The psychology of why a substance that literally slows your brain down has become the social glue of human civilization. That's what this video is about. Not for people with a clinical problem, for everyone. For the person who unwinds with a glass of wine after work. For the college student who suddenly becomes funnier at a party. For the widow who pours herself a scotch on the anniversary of something she can't quite name. Alcohol is the most widely used psychoactive substance in human history, and most people who consume it aren't addicted. They're just reaching for something. And here's what nobody tells you. That reaching is almost never about the drink itself. Let's start with what alcohol actually does to the brain, because the pop science version gets this badly wrong. Most people think alcohol is a stimulant, because that's what it looks like from the outside. People get louder, more confident, more energetic. But alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. What it's actually doing is suppressing the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-monitoring, social judgment, and the endless internal critic that tells you you're saying the wrong thing. In other words, alcohol doesn't add anything. It subtracts. It removes the filter. And for a huge portion of the population, that filter is exhausting to carry. A study published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs found that social anxiety is one of the strongest predictors of alcohol use. Not alcoholism, just regular drinking. People who score high on social anxiety measures are significantly more likely to use alcohol specifically in social situations. Not to get drunk, just to feel like a normal version of themselves that they can't access otherwise. Think about that for a second. For millions of people, drinking isn't escape, it's arrival. It's not that they become someone different. It's that they finally feel like the person they actually are when nobody's watching. But that's only one piece of the picture, and honestly not the most interesting one. There's a concept in psychology called tension reduction theory, developed in the 1950s, and it's held up remarkably well. The basic idea is that humans drink to reduce psychological tension. Stress, anxiety, fear, unresolved conflict. Your body physically relaxes, your heart rate slows. The cortisol that's been flooding your system all day starts to back off. For a brief window, the noise quiets. The problem is that this works, at least short term, and the human brain is extraordinarily good at remembering what works. Neuroscientists call this negative reinforcement, not punishment, but the relief that comes from removing something bad. When you drink and the tension lifts, your brain tags that experience. Next time tension appears, the brain already has a solution on file. This is how casual drinking becomes habitual drinking, without anyone ever making a conscious decision to change their behavior. But here's what makes human drinking genuinely different from almost any other animal behavior. We don't just drink to feel better. We drink to feel together. Anthropologists have traced communal alcohol consumption back at least 10,000 years. Some researchers, including Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania, have argued that the desire to ferment grain may have been one of the original drivers of settled agriculture. Before bread, before civilization as we recognize it, humans may have come together around the brew first. That's not an accident. Alcohol triggers the release of oxytocin, the same neurochemical that floods your system when you hug someone you love. It lowers the invisible walls between people. It creates what social psychologists call a shared vulnerability, a mutual lowering of defenses that makes genuine connection feel possible in ways that a sober Tuesday night meeting just doesn't. This is why every culture on Earth has a drinking ritual. It's not coincidence. It's neurochemistry meeting, thousands of years of social programming. And yet, and this is the part we rarely talk about, alcohol also works as a remarkably efficient emotional postponement tool. There's a theory called the alcohol myopia model, developed by Steele and Josephs in 1990, which argues that alcohol doesn't eliminate your problems or your emotions. It narrows your attention. You become myopic, able to focus only on what's immediately in front of you, the conversation you're having right now, the song playing, the feeling in your body. Whatever was weighing on you before you sat down becomes genuinely harder to access. For someone dealing with grief, with burnout, with a marriage that's slowly going wrong, with a career that feels meaningless, this narrowing is a gift. For a few hours, the thing they can't fix simply isn't present in the room. The tragedy, of course, is that alcohol myopia doesn't solve anything. The grief is still there in the morning, often amplified, because alcohol disrupts REM sleep and actually increases emotional reactivity the following day. Researchers call this the hangover anxiety effect. The morning after dread that isn't just physical. Your emotional regulation is genuinely impaired for 12 to 24 hours after drinking. So the thing you drank to escape comes back sharper, and the cycle inches forward. There's also something deeply cultural happening here that psychology alone can't explain. And this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable, because it means the problem might not be inside the person at all. In many societies, not drinking carries its own social cost. You get asked why. You have to explain yourself. You become a kind of mirror that makes other drinkers slightly uncomfortable, which makes you the problem in the room, even though you haven't done anything. Sobriety, in certain contexts, is the deviant choice. So, when people ask why someone drinks, sometimes the most accurate answer is, because stopping would cost them something too. The drink isn't always the problem. Sometimes it's the only membership card they have. And then there are the people who drink because of something that happened before they were old enough to understand what alcohol was. Childhood trauma is one of the most robust predictors of problematic drinking in adult life. The ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which tracked over 17,000 people, found that individuals with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences were 7 times more likely to develop alcohol dependence than those with none. 7 times. Not a modest correlation. An enormous one. What's happening there isn't weakness. It's a nervous system that was overwhelmed before it had the tools to cope, and then discovered, years later, often by accident, something that made the overwhelm stop. The brain doesn't care about long-term consequences in that moment. It cares that the pain went away. And the brain is very, very good at repeating whatever made the pain go away. People don't drink because alcohol is available and addictive. People drink because they're trying to solve real problems. Connection, anxiety, grief, trauma, boredom, the relentless pressure of being perceived, the exhaustion of performing a version of yourself all day. And alcohol is one of the fastest, most socially acceptable tools they have access to. Understanding that doesn't make heavy drinking less harmful. It doesn't excuse what alcohol destroys in families and bodies in years of a life. But it does completely change how we should think about helping people who are struggling with it. You can't shame someone out of a coping mechanism without offering them something else to cope with. You can't remove the tool without addressing the problem the tool was solving. And maybe the most uncomfortable truth of all is this. For most people, most of the time, it works just enough to keep working. It takes the edge off. It makes the party bearable. It turns strangers into something that feels briefly like family. It doesn't fix anything. But for a few hours, it makes the unfixed things quieter. And in a world that doesn't slow down and doesn't make space for the things that are actually wrong, quiet is worth a lot. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind the things we do, but rarely examine. And if you want to support this kind of work, the join button is right there. It genuinely helps.